In the United States, Donald Trump has dismissed as an illegitimate political attack a Manhattan judge's order for him to be sentenced on January the 10th in the hush money case 10 days before his inauguration. Mr. Trump was convicted in May on 34 felony counts. His lawyers had argued the president-elect was protected by presidential immunity. Justice Juan Merchan rejected this, but indicated that he was not inclined to impose a jail sentence and he would likely give Donald Trump an unconditional discharge. Our North America correspondent Peter Bowes reports.
Donald Trump and Stormy Daniels, the adult film star with whom the president-elect is accused of having a sexual encounter in 2006. A decade later, in the final days of the 2016 election campaign, the then Republican candidate attempted to buy her silence with a so-called hush money payment of more than $100,000. His conviction last year was for falsifying business records to try to cover up the payment. He's always denied any wrongdoing, but the guilty verdict meant Donald Trump was facing a possible jail sentence or a hefty fine. He attempted to use his second presidential election victory to have the case thrown out, but the judge refused. Instead, he said Mr. Trump would receive an unconditional discharge, so no jail time and no fine. But the guilty verdict remains. Donald Trump is appealing it, but it means he will be sworn in as president later this month as a convicted felon. In a statement, his spokesman said, "This lawless case should never have been brought, and the Constitution demands that it be immediately dismissed. President Trump will continue fighting against these hoaxes until they are all dead." That's a reference to the other criminal cases brought against Mr. Trump after his first presidency. One involving claims he mishandled classified documents at his Mar-a-Lago home in Florida, and two relating to his alleged efforts to overturn his defeat in the 2020 election and the subsequent January the 6th riots at the US Capitol building. For the most part, the cases have already been set aside, since the US Justice Department has a long-standing policy that a sitting president cannot face federal criminal prosecution. It all paves the way for a stunning turnaround in fortunes for Donald Trump, a second presidency free from the legal woes that once threatened to put him behind bars. Peter Bowes, BBC News.
The Republican Congressman Mike Johnson has narrowly won re-election to the most powerful seat in the US House of Representatives. Mr. Johnson was Donald Trump's pick for House Speaker, but in a tense first round of voting, three fellow Republicans cast ballots for someone else. At the very last minute, two of them switched their votes to support him just before the gavel went down. Let's take a listen.
House will be in order.
Mr. Norman Johnson. Mr. Self Johnson.
Well, in his maiden speech, he thanked members of Congress for re-electing him.
Today, my friends, our nation is the envy of the world. Why? Because we have been marked by a spirit and a people who are explicitly that. We are explicitly American. We don't try to be like other nations, and we recognize that a strong America is good for the entire world. And everybody around the globe knows that. That's right.
Our North America correspondent Rowan Bridge sent this update from Washington.
This was always going to be a day of high drama, and so it turned out. You could feel the tension in the air as the roll call of votes started. At first it looked like Mike Johnson would sail through on the first vote, and then three of his critics voted against him. Some last-minute arm twisting was enough to get two of them to change their vote and hand Mike Johnson the Speaker's gavel. He now holds one of the most powerful positions in American politics. In his address to Congress after being elected, Mike Johnson echoed much of the America First language that Donald Trump used on the campaign trail. This election means that Donald Trump has a key ally in a key position when it comes to passing his legislation and be able to help push forward Donald Trump's agenda in 2025.
Rowan Bridge. Daniel Lippman is White House reporter for Politico. He gave us his thoughts on Donald Trump's likely reaction to the sentencing date.
Did not want this to be on his record, on his resume, for Americans to be hearing about his extramarital affair, allegedly, with Stormy Daniels. And so I think it's embarrassing to his wife as well, Melania. I think she's had years to get over it. But he did not, he thinks that this is a blemish on his record, or he would not be fighting this as hard. But Judge Merchan said, hey, we can't just let people who were convicted in a jury to be scot-free when Trump himself and the Supreme Court said, hey, you're not, they did not weigh on state charges. And so he said there's no get out of jail free card in this instance. It's called an unconditional discharge. And so it's almost like a slap on the wrist. It's saying, hey, for people who are committing crimes like this in the future, which was business fraud charges, and you're found guilty, we're not going to wipe away the slate clean for Trump. We're not going to say this verdict and this conviction did not happen at all. And so in reality, he's not going to get prison time. He's not going to get probation time. He is not going to even get a fine. So he doesn't have to pay a penny to New York state taxpayers or the court system. But he will appeal this conviction likely, and it may go all the way to the Supreme Court, and we'll have to see what they say. But for at least a certain amount of time, it looks likely that he will be a felon on day one, which is not what his voters would have wanted, especially since those federal charges went away. And even after his presidency in 4 years, unlikely that he would go to jail again.